I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Gennady Stolyarov II, an actuary, philosopher, science fiction novelist, poet, amateur mathematician, composer, and editor-in-chief of The Rational Argumentator, chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, and chief executive of the Nevada Transhumanist Party, which he helped to found. Gennady is the author of Death is Wrong, an ambitious children's book on life extension. He's also contributed numerous articles to the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technologies, the Wave Chronicle, Brighter Brains Institute, Immortal Life, Enter Stage Right, Rebirth of Reason, the Liberal Institute, and several other notable publications. Gennady holds a number of professional designations in the insurance, actuarial, regulatory, and compliance industries, and is the author of numerous well-known actuarial study guides, including Practice Problems and Advanced Topics in General Insurance, along with the science fiction novel Eden Against the Colossus, a philosophical treatise, A Rational Cosmology, the play Implied Consent, a self-help treatise, The Best Self-Help is Free. So, Gennady, welcome back. It is a pleasure and a true honor to have you with me today, sir.
Thank you very much, Tim. It is a pleasure to speak with you again as well, and I look forward to quite an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. Well, today we are talking about your absolutely brilliant vision for the technological singularity, which is described as a hypothetical future point in time at which technological growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible, resulting in unforeseeable consequences for human civilization. So your vision for this is brilliant. And you have predicted, among other things, that the singularity that we are looking forward to isn't humanity's first and likely won't be our last, right? Can you start us out with an overview of that?
Indeed. So the concept of a technological singularity was first articulated by the mathematician John Von Neumann, and he described it as the ever-accelerating progress of technology and changes in the mode of human life, which gives the appearance of approaching some essential singularity in the history of humanity beyond which human affairs as we know them could not continue. And the way I see a technological singularity is essentially an event horizon. It is a transformation or a set of transformations beyond which, for people living before those transformations, it is not readily possible to anticipate what the future will look like, what daily life even will look like. And from that standpoint, I would contend that humankind has already had at least three technological singularities, which were the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and the information revolution. And the information revolution indeed occurred within living memory of some of the people who are still with us today. But for each of these singularities, the essential characteristic is that people who were alive before they occurred could not anticipate how the world would be. So Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, for instance, would not have been able to foresee the city-states of agricultural civilizations or the maritime commerce that they engaged in or the tools that they devised. Likewise, Leonardo da Vinci, I would say, was one of the great geniuses of the agricultural age, and he certainly was a remarkably talented, remarkably inventive individual. He even foresaw such future developments as flying machines and tanks. And yet, even someone as brilliant as Leonardo da Vinci could not have foreseen all of the achievements of the Industrial Revolution, which were brought about due to mass production, not just specific singular inventions, but the entire infrastructure to distribute those inventions and their outputs to the masses. And this really revolutionized daily life as a result of the changes that started in the late 18th century and accelerated throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. when we consider some of the greatest minds of the industrial age, people like Henry Ford, who pioneered the assembly line approach to the production of vehicles. Henry Ford was remarkably forward-thinking for his time. However, he most likely would not have been able to anticipate the computer age and the kinds of opportunities that it opened up to people, or the internet, or social media platforms. If one were to mention to Henry Ford a platform along the lines of Facebook or YouTube or X, formerly Twitter, I don't think Henry Ford would have the conceptual background to really be readily conversant with those kinds of platforms or what they would enable people to do. So with each of these technological transformations, we essentially entered into a qualitatively new world as a result of changes in the technological possibilities that humans had at their disposal. And these technological opportunities essentially built upon themselves and combined in synergistic ways to produce these new realities, these new ways of living.
Again, this is an absolutely amazing perspective. And I think that the paradigm that you're viewing it from, viewing it as an event horizon, like John Von Neumann did, helps us to understand what's coming next and characterize that a bit, as well as look back and understand where these past singularities happened. And again, you have said that those are the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and the information revolution. Now, in terms of what comes next, futurists like Ray Kurzweil have focused heavily on artificial intelligence. But from what I understand, you believe that it will be larger than just an AI breakthrough alone. What we're looking at is a convergence of technologies, not one specific breakthrough, right?
That is correct. So artificial intelligence will certainly play an important role in the coming technological singularity, and it is already making strides in that direction with the emergence of large language models and generative AI platforms that can create images, that can create music, that can create videos now. But there are other emerging technologies that are advancing. For instance, biotechnology and innovative applications of biotechnology to medicine, nanotechnology, automation, new additive manufacturing or 3D printing techniques, and also advances in agriculture. Vertical farming is an example. Advances in space travel. We have a renaissance of human spaceflight that is ongoing thanks to the efforts of companies such as SpaceX and Blue Origin, and NASA is being revitalized as well, and there's progress in India and China right now. So we have all of these areas that are progressing in parallel and that also interact with one another. So artificial intelligence can be applied to, for instance, research protein folding configurations. Google's AlphaFold is a great example of that. And another example is that artificial intelligence can be integrated in production approaches. So you could have smarter assembly line robots, essentially, that can perform a wider variety of tasks without human supervision. You can integrate artificial intelligence in autonomous vehicles to save the almost 40,000 people that die in automobile accidents every year in the United States. And these are just some examples, but there are second order and third order effects from not just the progress of one particular technological field, but from these synergies, from the integration of these different strains of technology. And this is actually what generates the event horizon nature of a technological singularity, because the human mind has the proclivity to project current trends forward. And if we see advances, say, in artificial intelligence or in robotics, we can think, well, what will happen next? And what will happen after that? And how could that change our opportunities? How could that change our daily life? So we have that ability of foresight. What we don't have the ability to do as readily is to think about, well, what will happen when these 2 or 3 or 4 technologies combine to create a new product or a new way of interacting or a new concept? And once you have a new concept, you can build other concepts on top of it. Just like today, people have concepts of what is a social media platform. People have a concept of what generative AI is, and now what can you use generative AI for? I think 5 years ago, it would have been difficult to have these conversations about, well, are we going to be writing books with it? Are we going to be creating videos with it? How is the job market going to be transformed by it? Now these conversations are ubiquitous. And there will be other conversations that we can't readily foresee because it won't be just one strain of technology that will advance. So I think what is likely to happen with this new technological singularity is that these strains of emerging technologies will interact with one another to bring about a future of radical abundance compared to our current standards of living, where we will have access to many more material goods than we do right now cheaply, and some will be virtually free, at least in terms of our current outlooks on costs. We will have significantly greater health and longevity. Hopefully, longevity escape velocity will be one of the outcomes of this coming technological singularity, where we will gain more than 1 year of life expectancy for every year that passes, and we will actually become biologically younger and more resilient against the diseases of old age. So those are some of my hopes for the upcoming technological singularity, but there will be other transformations and other opportunities that I frankly cannot foresee, just like Leonardo da Vinci could not have foreseen the aftermath of the industrial age or the information revolution.
Let's get into artificial superintelligence. British mathematician I.J. Good, who worked as a cryptologist with Alan Turing at Bletchley Park, proposed an intelligence explosion where an upgradable intelligent agent will eventually enter a runaway reaction of self-improvement that results in a powerful superintelligence far surpassing all human intelligence. So this prediction goes back to, I believe this was 1965. From what I understand, this is and has been a fundamental part of the prediction for the upcoming singularity, right?
Well, various individuals' forecasts regarding the upcoming technological singularity do include an artificial intelligence that becomes significantly more intelligent than any given human mind, and then becomes significantly more intelligent than the combined mental abilities of the human species. And Ray Kurzweil, for instance, has prognosticated that by 2029, there will be an AI that is more intelligent than a single human. And by 2045, there will be an AI that is more intelligent than the entire human species put together. Now, this vision of recursive self-improvement to some extent happens already. So to use an example, ChatGPT can write computer code in various languages. And that code can sometimes be imperfect, sometimes it has bugs, so humans still need to look it over and make sure that it makes sense. But theoretically, one can apply the output of a large language model, such as ChatGPT, to develop further large language models. And right now, the incremental improvement in the ability to develop future large language models could be modest. But with each iteration, as the AI system becomes better, and it doesn't have to be a large language model, it could be an AI system that works on a different premise, then the amount gained by that could increase as well. So there is this possibility of each generation of AI systems being used to make the next generation of AI systems and improve our technological resources even further. Now, where I differ with some forecasts of this technological singularity is that I don't believe that this process is going to lead to a kind of uncontrollable runaway intelligence explosion that would be threatening to humankind. And the reason is that at each step, there will still be some checks as well as some failure points. Like the code could be imperfect. That's one possible failure point. There could be limitations to physical infrastructure and how the outputs of that system are instantiated. There is also the factor of human will and what people want to do with it or don't want to do with it, which I think is sometimes not sufficiently taken into account. But somebody still has to make the decision to develop that next iteration of an artificially intelligent system. And one has to ask for what purposes will it be deployed, who is going to develop it, those kinds of questions. I think it's highly unlikely that the process of the development of these systems is just going to enter an unstoppable loop that is going to accelerate so fast that in a single day or a single week or some other comparatively short time period, we're going to go from relatively normal everyday life to something that completely overpowers humankind, and we have no ability to anticipate what it's going to do. That's the fast takeoff scenario, and I don't subscribe to it. I do subscribe to the iterative improvement that is going to happen and has been happening already, but I see it still as a more gradual path where, from our current vantage point, we can't foresee what that world in its aftermath is going to look like, but at every stage along the way, we're going to have more insight into that as we transition into that world.
I appreciate your talking about those aspects of it. And I want to come back to those actually, because that was something when I was drafting questions, I had a lot of those same thoughts, I guess. But before that, I want to get into dates and timelines just a bit. Based on advances in computing power, Vernor Vinge estimated the singularity would happen between 2005 and 2030. Eliezer Yukowsky predicted 2021 is the year. Ray Kurzweil said 2045. And more recent polls by Nick Bostrom and Vincent C. Müller have estimated a 2040 to 2050 timeframe. So I'm wondering if, all things being equal here, if Kurzweil's estimate of 2045, which seems like it's right kind of in the middle there, is still the predicted date, or do recent advances in AI move that timeline forward at all?
I think Kurzweil's estimate of 2045 is still reasonable, and I will qualify this by saying this is still contingent on developments in human society and culture and what humans decide to do with AI technologies. Now, Eliezer Yukowsky clearly prognosticated a date that was too soon because 2021 has already elapsed. And I think his mistake, and this is a key area of disagreement that I have with him, is that he believes a fast takeoff is not only possible, but an imminent threat to humanity. And I disagree with him on that. If he was foreseeing a fast takeoff essentially a decade and a half ago, then I'm not surprised that 2021 was a kind of central estimate that he provided. But based on the developments that we have actually observed, they're impressive developments, but they are still incremental developments. That is to say, every year we gain certain abilities like predicting protein folding configurations or being able to generate compelling short stories or interesting visuals or now videos. But we still don't have this kind of situation where in a week or even a month, life is transformed beyond recognition. And I don't think life will be transformed beyond recognition within those short time frames. However, with the accumulation of these iterative improvements, I do think it's reasonable that by 2045, we may have an intelligence that exceeds the brain power of humanity. Now, I will also qualify, I don't think that means that intelligence will take over the world, because intelligence does not equal power. So you could have a highly intelligent person, for instance. Let's use Stephen Hawking as an example, one of the most intelligent and brilliant people who ever lived. But Stephen Hawking was paralyzed for the majority of his life because of his unfortunate ailment of ALS. And he had to be assisted by other humans in his daily living functions. And he, through advanced technology, could communicate by means of a twitch of his lip, but it certainly was more effort for him to communicate than for any of us. So he was only able to realize some fraction of his potential, probably less, much less than if he hadn't had the disability, because of the assistance of human beings and of other technological devices. So it's quite possible that these artificially intelligent systems would be super intelligent, but also super dependent on us and super fragile. And actually, they would have more to fear from humans than humans would have to fear from them. But they could also greatly benefit our species, because they could solve problems that we, with our unaided biological brains, would simply not have either the processing ability or the sophistication to solve.
Well, Yukowsky predicted that the actual process of AI self-improvement would take roughly 4 years. And again, I believe this is the fast takeoff approach that you talked about earlier. But other than that, descriptions of the singularity tend to ignore the effects of friction in terms of hardware development times, the economy, manufacturing, and resource acquisition. And another aspect that you touched on was friction that comes from human beings. It takes time for people to retrain for new careers, and it requires time for people to develop the trust to give AI the authority to change the world, right? So one of the things that it occurred to me was it's entirely likely that government would benefit or be just far better off being run by AI. But without people trusting it, we won't see change in that area, right?
Yes. Well, looking at American politics today, I would favor an AI president right now over the leading contenders from either of the major political parties. I mean, give me President ChatGPT in 2025 at this rate, even if it's not sentient. And I don't think it's sentient. I would rather have a non-sentient, narrow AI as president than either of the presumptive nominees of the Republicans or Democrats. But I think you can see that the political class would be quite resistant to that notion. And it is indeed the societal resistance that can delay the practical arrival of a technological singularity, even if the technical potential to realize it is there. So Ray Kurzweil has written about this as well, that with regard to many of his predictions in books like The Age of Spiritual Machines and The Singularity is Near, the technical ability to realize those futures arrived on schedule, according to Kurzweil, but the societal will to adopt those technologies just wasn't there. For instance, Ray Kurzweil predicted autonomous vehicles being developed by 2009, and indeed they were developed. There were DARPA competitions where those vehicles quite competently navigated the roads of the United States. And I remember in 2011, Google was making a major push with regulators to get autonomous vehicles rolled out in various jurisdictions throughout the country. I live in Nevada, where Google made one of the first efforts to do that. And many regulators were actually receptive, but the general public was still skeptical. And a lot of people did not want to put their trust in AI systems, even though those systems have shown to reduce accidents by about 95%. So they eliminated the vast majority of accidents due to human error. The public was still afraid of sometimes inscrutable errors that AI systems could make. So the AI systems don't make the same mistakes that we do, but sometimes they make very silly mistakes that humans would obviously be able to avoid even in an impaired or suboptimal state. And that is what a lot of people in the general public were afraid of. And unfortunately, that fear has not really been alleviated at this time. Even though driverless cars have been more widely deployed, they still remain a niche technology compared to manually driven vehicles. So what will then lead to that inflection point where the majority of vehicles on the road are autonomous? I think that's more a task for marketing and advocacy than it is for technological development itself, because already these cars are much safer than vehicles driven by humans. But sometimes they won't recognize a fire truck, for instance, or sometimes they won't operate as well in rainy or snowy weather, or they'll be misled by a certain object. So these mistakes are possible, and liability systems need to be developed to take those issues into account. But I think there will be a point at which, with enough advocacy, we will be able to persuade first a sizable core of early adopters and then the rest of the general public to accept those technologies. And of course, regulatory reforms will need to continue to enable those vehicles to be operated on par with manually driven vehicles. But that's just an example. With any iteration of AI technologies, there are already many questions and many reservations that people have. And a lot of special interests are going to try to derail or delay the coming technological singularity. And they will do so from very prosaic considerations, like some people do fear becoming displaced by AI systems. Some people fear the generative AI systems infringing upon their intellectual property, allegedly. Some people fear a loss of creative agency, though I think that fear is misplaced because an AI tool can be a great boost to our creativity. But again, it is the task of advocacy to alleviate those fears and give people options, give people an understanding of what their opportunities are with these technologies so that they recognize that they have more to gain than to fear from their distribution and adoption.
Your example of self-driving vehicles was wonderful. I have a Tesla Model 3, so I am an example of what you're talking about. It has full self-driving capability. I haven't activated that, and I have never used that because I don't fully trust it. I am more comfortable with the risk factors that I know throughout my manual driving career, I guess. And so perhaps someday that will change. But for the time being, I'm a case study in what you were just talking about. So thank you for that. Now, overall, your view of the singularity is positive, but Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and many others have voiced deep concerns about advances in AI and this eventual AI superintelligence. Stephen Hawking had said the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race, and Elon Musk believes that general AI is the greatest existential threat to humanity. Are they right to have these concerns, or do you think that this is alarmist?
I think that it's right to have some concerns about risks associated with AI, just as every technology has risks depending on how it's used. But as my friend Jose Cordero likes to point out, the greater danger is not artificial intelligence, it's human stupidity. And in this case, it's bad human applications of AI or bad human motives in whose service AI is put. So to give an example, autonomous weapons, autonomous killing systems would be a case where AI is certainly misapplied. However, autonomous systems that, for instance, help transport people or help produce goods cheaply that people need for their lives or for improving the quality of their lives, AI for healthcare, all of those would be beneficial applications. So there is that dimension. But I think the more fundamental fear that people like Hawking and Elon Musk have is of this runaway intelligence explosion, which then creates this kind of alien mind that doesn't care about humans and either intentionally or just as a byproduct of its other goals, will destroy humanity. And I don't hold to that concern to the same extent. I think the mistake that people who express the existential risk concerns about AI make is this mistake of singular extrapolation. Like, what if the super intelligent entity emerged and the rest of the world is roughly as it is today? And this is the fast takeoff scenario because Eliezer Yukowsky obviously thought it could have happened already in our world as it is. However, as I mentioned, other technologies are also advancing in parallel. So I am more of a techno-optimist when it comes to AI, and my reasoning is similar to Ray Kurzweil. It's not going to be this sharp delineation between humans and AI that leads to this intelligence explosion. Kurzweil describes this as a merger with AI. I would say this is a broader concept than perhaps the stereotypical integration of human biology with cybernetic parts or something like that, though that may still well happen, and it is happening to some extent. People do have functional prosthetics now. They have hearing aids that are integrated with their nervous systems. They have artificial organs, artificial hearts, for instance. So some sort of cyborgization could well happen. But something like a mobile phone, for instance, is an external augmentation. A fitness tracker is an external augmentation that interfaces with our biology. And the various AI tools, the narrow AI tools that we have right now, are going to be at our disposal as well. So when we interface with future artificial general intelligences, artificial superintelligences, we're not just going to be our biological organisms. We're going to be our biological organisms augmented by all of these other technologies, including AI technologies. So it's not going to be humans versus AI. It's going to be humans and AI, humans using AI, humans integrated with AI. But we're still going to be individual humans as well. So I don't subscribe to the idea that we're all going to merge into the same superorganism like the Borg, or have a kind of unitary global brain, nor would I want that. I'm an ethical individualist quite strongly, so I still want to be me. I just want to be an enhanced version of me, and I want everyone else to be enhanced versions of themselves as individuals. So that's going to provide a check on the ability of any single entity, be it human or AI, to just take over the world and overpower all of the others. Because as with any technological revolution, it's not going to be just one entity that gains the power from this technology. Everyone gains power to some extent, perhaps some individuals, some organizations to a greater extent than others, and it's a worthwhile conversation to have who is empowered to a greater extent by these AI systems. But the end configuration of that, or the dynamic configuration of that, because it will also keep evolving, is going to be something where we're still going to have, let's say, individuals who are relatively more influential, individuals who are relatively less influential, but people will still strive to improve their positions. And if we have sentient AGIs, they too will strive to improve their positions, and they may have some advantages over humans, but humans may still have some advantages over them. So that's the kind of post-technological singularity world that I think is more likely, but of course the specific details of it are beyond that event horizon for us.
And again, that is an excellent point. You know, we can look forward so far, and we can perhaps characterize what may be coming, but by definition, this is an event horizon, right? So that we can't see past it. Now, one thing that did interest me is these predictions of existential risk seem to have faded a little bit recently, but we are seeing a lot more concerns about jobs in the economy. And so this, for me, this seems like it could go either way. There are a lot of people out there who have deep concerns that AI will put a great part of the workforce out of work. I'm hearing the term UBI bandied around a lot, but no one seems to have a good idea how that might be implemented. I've also heard talk about, living in a post-scarcity economy, especially after the singularity, where we might not need jobs. A UBI might be enough because it may completely change the dynamic of the economy itself. Do you have any thoughts on how jobs and the economy may work in that environment?
Yes, I have many thoughts on this, and certainly this is an ongoing conversation because, as you mentioned, this is an empirical question. It's true that some people are likely to be displaced, and some people may already be losing their jobs because of certain progress in AI systems. I wouldn't be surprised if a significant portion of the layoffs in Silicon Valley right now have something to do with AI advancements. On the other hand, we have seen this with prior technological revolutions where advances, for instance, in agricultural technology have led most people to lose agricultural jobs. Advances in industrial technology have led most people to lose factory jobs. Yet, on the whole, people are better off now with the kinds of jobs that they have. Those jobs are less physically straining, they're less dangerous, they're more knowledge-oriented or service-oriented, and I will admit a lot of those jobs are still not ideal, but compared to the plight of agricultural laborers in the 18th century or factory workers in the 19th century, they are vast improvements. But of course, I think it is important to consider what is going to happen to people who are affected by this transition, who may have had jobs that satisfied them before, and now those jobs have been made obsolete. As you mentioned, universal basic income proposals have picked up traction, and the U.S. Transhumanist Party was at the forefront of this. Our founder, Zoltan Istvan, proposed a UBI as early as 2014, and we continue to advocate essentially his concept of a federal land dividend, where currently unused portions of federal land could be leased out to private corporations for development purposes, subject to, of course, preservation of national landmarks or national parks, so that anything that people actually enjoy or derive value from will be maintained. But for land that has no useful purpose or no aesthetic value right now, they could extract revenue from it and pay essentially fees that would be used to fund a UBI. This is analogous to the Alaska Permanent Fund that exists today and pays residents of the state of Alaska anywhere from a few $100s to low four-figure sums every year as a result of the oil revenues of the state of Alaska. So what if we could scale up that model countrywide, and this may be a variable UBI, but it would be a good start. And there have been other proposals, for instance, for crypto-based universal basic incomes, philanthropically funded universal basic incomes. I think all of these ideas are worth exploring, and they can be done without increasing taxes on the general public, which I think are the advantages of those proposals. Now, in terms of retraining, for instance, I think it is worthwhile for people to adopt an attitude of lifelong learning. They can't just rely on having one particular career their entire lives or going to school and then that's it and they don't need to develop themselves. No, they need to continually update their skills because, as many have said already, if they get replaced, they're not going to be replaced by AI. They're going to be replaced by humans using AI. So if they too can become humans who use AI and know how to use it well, they will maintain a competitive advantage. Furthermore, there are certain jobs that AI is not going to render obsolete anytime soon. And those are the jobs that require a kind of executive judgment and decision-making capability that jumps across many different domains and integrates those domains, and also incorporates dynamic information about the world. And to give a fairly simple example, I recently returned from a trip to New York City. And New York City is an interesting and rather hectic place to navigate by foot. But as I was navigating New York City, I realized how many sensory inputs I have to process, how many distinct variables and entities I have to keep track of to understand what are the other pedestrians doing, what are the vehicles doing, where am I going, how fast am I getting there, all of these features. And at the same time, I wanted to take in the sights of the city and enjoy them a bit. So all of these distinct capacities are beyond the best AI systems of today. Sure, the Boston Dynamics robots, for instance, could do backflips and some interesting dance moves. They might run faster than you or I could run, but nonetheless, could they navigate the streets of New York City? Or a large language model, for instance, ChatGPT, famously was trained on data from the internet prior to September 2021. So it had a lot of information, but it was information that was cut off at a fixed point in time, and it wouldn't be able to learn the same way that we learn by taking in new information. Of course, subsequent versions of ChatGPT have been updated with more current databases, but still, what they interact with are snapshots of the world, not an ever-changing world. And our ability as humans, with our very flexible and adaptable minds to navigate an ever-changing world, remains a strong absolute and comparative advantage that we have over AI systems, which is why I think in the foreseeable future, the job market is still going to involve humans, just humans using AI, humans that need to retrain and reskill themselves. And policymakers do need to be cognizant about this. So I'm not saying let's throw people to the wayside. I'm saying let's have programs to educate people about AI. Let's have AI tutors in schools, which is an initiative that our presidential candidate, Tom Ross, advocates. Let's have essentially systems that allow people to transition and maybe even pay people who have been displaced so that they're not up in arms about the fact of their displacement. Rather, they can use that money to tide themselves over and to re-educate themselves. But I do think for most people, if they get that support, if they get those resources, they could thrive in a new economy where AI plays a greater role.
Those are all excellent points. Let me add to that one prediction of my own, which is that many of the companies that dominate today's markets will be displaced due to normal disruptive market change. And we see this happening right now with Tesla overtaking the big three Detroit automakers. And I believe a post-singularity world would have at least as much market disruption as we saw at the beginning of the World Wide Web, right? And people need to keep in mind that the big five tech companies, right, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon, I believe, I think I'm leaving one out there, they are serving products that didn't exist 30 years ago, you know? And so in a post-singularity world, we are likely to see just as much of the same, right?
Yes, absolutely. So it's interesting because when I was in high school first learning about the Dow Jones Index, I was surprised to learn that General Electric at that time was the only company that was originally included in the Dow Jones Index and that was still on the Dow Jones Index at that time. And since that time, even General Electric had fallen off of the Dow Jones Index. So now all of the companies that are considered essentially the leading players in the market are different from when that index was initiated. And likewise, the top 5 tech companies today, most of them were not dominant in the 1990s, and none of them existed in the 1970s. So it's quite feasible that a different set of dominant players will emerge with the next technological revolution. I think this is because institutions are not necessarily as adaptable as the whole of the human species. And institutions may kind of be locked into ways of functioning or business models that served them well before, but they may at some point grow unwieldy and ossified and overly bureaucratic, and thus will lack the nimbleness that characterized their startup phase, and so they will not be able to fully capitalize on the next technological revolution. Though, of course, the possibility remains that some of them could. Some companies have successfully pivoted between one technological paradigm and another. So General Electric actually did better in that regard than a company such as Kodak, for instance, or a company such as Blockbuster. At least General Electric still exists today. And it's possible that a few of those big tech companies will pivot as well. Famously, of course, Mark Zuckerberg is trying to pivot to this metaverse concept. Google is just really diversifying. Alphabet, I should say, is really diversifying its business operations so that it's much more than a search engine type of business now. But who knows what will be the dominant players? For instance, a company like Moderna was just an incipient startup in 2019, and now it is a household name. That's just one example. OpenAI was not very well known in the 2010s. Now it is one of the best known entities in the world, and there are other players in the AI space. Anthropic, for example, is another such entity that was formed very recently. So could these be the dominant players of the future? Could some other companies emerge that we don't know about yet? And of course, with the advent of this next technological singularity, the pace of change is going to accelerate. So the turnover among those organizations is going to accelerate as well. Now, one possibility could be the emergence of new kinds of business models. So the late 20th and early 21st century were dominated by organizations which were essentially publicly traded corporations, which held as their explicit purpose the maximization of what they call shareholder value, which is really the stock price. And that led to behaviors that maximize short-term profits, often at the expense of organizational longevity. Now, there could be many different ways of operating a business. For example, a benefit corporation is an entity that explicitly prioritizes other objectives, or say the OpenAI framework was essentially a hybrid framework where there was a for-profit arm, but there's also a non-profit entity that maximized other kinds of goals, ostensibly developing AI for the benefit of humanity. There are different opinions as to how that turned out, but nonetheless, there has been experimentation with different organizational structures. So could there be new organizational structures that focus on values like the beneficial deployment of technology or the long-term sustainability of the organization? I think that's worth thinking about in this new world, because I think these conventional shareholder value maximizing corporations might burn themselves out too quickly and might not see a long-term opportunity because it doesn't fit the framework of maximizing the quarterly bottom line.
Well, I want to touch on some of the deeper meaning of the singularity as well. And one of the things that I've wondered about is whether the singularity could change our definition of life itself, especially when we're looking at AI superintelligence. I'm wondering if we may come to regard those as living beings, at least in a digital sense. And I'm also wondering if the singularity could change what it means to be human. And this goes to what you touched on earlier. Ray Kurzweil had said the pace of change will be so astonishingly quick that we won't be able to keep up unless we enhance our own intelligence by merging with the intelligent machines we're creating. So ultimately, this brings us back to this convergence idea. And I'm wondering if that could be perceived or in actuality be a new form of life on Earth, and if it could be the beginning of a merger between what we think of as the natural and the artificial today.
I think it very well could be. And indeed, the Transhumanist Party has encouraged our civilization to engage in deliberations about this possibility and how to respond to it. We have a document called the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, version 3.0, which was developed by our members. The first version was written by Zoltan Istvan, but since then it has been greatly expanded in the process of two detailed votes, the last of which we held in December 2018. And this is a document that seeks to seriously consider what is a sentient entity that is deserving of rights. And instead of linking it to a particular species or a biological origin, we think of it in terms of information processing capabilities. And there are 7 levels of information processing capabilities that are posited in the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, of which entities of level 5 and higher, which of course include human beings, are entitled to rights. But these rights are generalized in such a way that they could apply to future intelligences that are not biological, or future uplifted animals, or if we encounter extraterrestrial life forms that are not human but have these same functions, these same capabilities in essence, they would be entitled to rights. And I think this is extremely important because the amount of diversity in our society is also going to undergo this rapid proliferation akin to an intelligence explosion. If people are having, in some cases, issues with the diversity we have today with race, gender, sexual orientation, nationality, etc., I would suggest that they get used to it very quickly, because this will pale in comparison to the kind of diversity we're going to see in the future with these artificially intelligent systems and other sentient entities that we may come across. And the way we treat individuals, entities who are different from us, but who still have sophisticated capabilities, who still have something to offer to our civilization, will be a distinguishing feature of whom we become, what our society becomes, what the outcomes will be in our civilization. So I do think we need to lay the groundwork for this to avoid major civil rights struggles in the future. And we need to have an expansive framework of rights. If we err, it should be on the side of granting rights rather than restricting rights, because we don't want to make the mistake of failing to recognize a sentient entity that will then be quite justifiably upset at us. And I also think when we speak about artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence in the future, let's not use fearful language. Let's not demonize the potential future AGIs, because if they do arise, they will look back at the humans of this era and how the humans of this era characterized their arrival. And I think they would be a lot more favorably disposed toward us if we at least tried to give them the benefit of the doubt and tried to consider that they might be worthwhile entities for inclusion in our future civilization.
On that note, Gennady, let me thank you so much for your time today. Again, a tremendous pleasure and an absolute honor having you with me. I want to close by asking, what do you see next coming for AI as we move a little bit further into 2024? And what are your own plans for the rest of this year as well?
Well, I think 2024 is going to be for videos generated via AI what late 2022 and 2023 were for images generated via AI. If you recall, for instance, DALL-E 2. DALL-E 2 was impressive by the standards of its time because it could now generate images that were kind of sort of good. But when you compare DALL-E 3 to DALL-E 2 and what that could produce, as well as other image generating platforms. Google now has one called ImageFX, and Midjourney has evolved as well. The images that we can now get, especially the landscapes, are just absolutely remarkable. So right now we have rudimentary AI video generation capabilities. They're still not widespread, and I think a lot of the videos that have been produced thus far, they have been released mostly for demo purposes. But what if these tools come into the hands of ordinary everyday users? I think that's going to happen later this year, because once a technology is seriously available for that kind of mass deployment, even if one organization, say OpenAI, wants to keep it proprietary or keep it locked down, only available to paying users, once the technological capabilities are out there, competition will take care of having those capabilities being made available to the general public, almost for free, and in many cases for free, as the image generation AI deployment has shown. So my prediction is by the end of 2024, many of us who take an interest in technology, perhaps not the majority of humanity, but those of us who are steeped in generative AI already, will be making quite impressive AI-generated videos. Now, in terms of what I am working on this year, first of all, I am helping our Transhumanist Party candidate, Tom Ross. He's our presidential candidate. Daniel Tweed is our vice presidential candidate in their campaign. We are going to be pursuing ballot access in some states. Hopefully, we will get Tom Ross on the debate stage for certain presidential debates. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are not going to be debating anyone realistically, but some of the minor party candidates, I think, are going to have some very constructive conversations this year. We want to expand the public's awareness of transhumanism, because I truly think transhumanism is the philosophy of this transitional period to the next technological singularity. It is a comprehensive philosophical framework that helps us to make sense of these developments and also puts us as humans in the best position to respond to these developments and gain from them. Now, in terms of what I hope to see in connection with my interest in longevity and the children's book that I wrote called Death is Wrong, I'm going to reveal to you that there is going to be a computer game called Death is Wrong. It's going to be a platformer type of game, think Super Mario Brothers, except the character is going to be essentially fighting monsters, receiving power-ups that are related to the perils that endanger our lives, as well as what can extend our lives and protect us from those perils. So that's going to be, I think, an enjoyable retro-type platformer for people to play. Another game that I'm seeking to resurrect is called LEV. The game LEV stands for Longevity Escape Velocity. And that is going to be a turn-based game where one is going to be able to make decisions every year about how to allocate one's energy for purposes of extending life or advocating for improvements in the world. And the goal of this game is to reach longevity escape velocity, is to essentially overcome the ravages of biological aging and also, of course, protect oneself from adverse world events that could shorten one's life. So be on the lookout for that game. This is a concept that another team originated in 2014, but they didn't really have the resources to continue it. So I have essentially acquired the rights from them to do that. And both of these games will be freely available to the public. But speaking of LEV, I'm also the treasurer of the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, which was founded by Dr. Aubrey de Grey. And Dr. de Grey foresees with about a 50% probability the arrival of longevity escape velocity in the next 12 to 15 years as comprehensive rejuvenation therapies are made available. So we're seeking to make that a reality with the projects of the LEVF. one project that I'm particularly excited about is the robust mouse rejuvenation study that is currently underway. It is the most ambitious mouse lifespan study in history. It began with 1,000 mice, and many of those mice are still alive. And the distinguishing features of this study are that the mice are being followed to the end of their lifespans for the most part, except a minority of mice that are sacrificed to get certain tissue samples. But most mice will live out as long as they possibly can. And also, combinations of interventions are being trialed. So up to 4 distinct interventions, and some mice are receiving all 4. The ones that received all 4 are doing quite well, quite a bit better than many of the other cohorts right now. So this is very promising because we are exploring combinatorial approaches to longevity and rejuvenation. Be on the lookout for the results of the robust mouse rejuvenation study, as well as hopefully subsequent studies which will test different interventions as well.
Amazing. Let me thank you one more time for your time today, sir.
Thank you very much, Tim. I greatly enjoyed this conversation.